We have a guest on the phone, and we don't want to turn him off here. His name is Ben Zimmer, and Ben is with the Connecticut Policy Institute. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Listen, I saw your op-ed piece. You pointed it out to me in the Journal-Inquirer, and looking at why Connecticut's budget deficit keeps on reappearing. This week, the legislature took care of most of the current deficit, which was, last I knew, something around $400 million, but we're still, I assume, still looking at over $1 billion in the next fiscal year. But let's get back to what your piece is about, and that's why we keep falling short. We have the tax revenue; it just hasn't come in as expected, and Connecticut's recovery has been slower than much slower than the rest of the country. Why is that?
Yep. Well, I think the two are really intertwined, and I think our job growth and our tax revenue has been so much slower than the country as a whole in neighboring states because our fiscal policy is inadequate and tends to be more politically motivated than based on good policy.
Oh, come on, Ben. The Hartford to New Britain busway, that's a good idea.
Well, there are some people who say that's a good idea. There are other people who say it's a bridge to nowhere. But, you have to look at these spending projects in terms of what's the return on the investment that you're going to be getting out of it. Mm-hmm. The state's putting up well over $100 million, I think close to $200 million for that busway. And the question you have to ask is if you're going to be spending $200 million on infrastructure, is that the place to be doing it? You look at, there's a lot of talk about the need to engage in dredging of the state's ports that would cost in the tens of millions of dollars. And, you talk to people who are experts in transportation policy, there's a much better consensus there that that's something that really needs to be done economically.
So if we do you're saying the money would be better spent dredging to allow ships carrying a lot more cargo, deeper draft, as they say, I believe it is, to come into our port. New Haven is a pretty busy port anyway.
Yeah, so it is a pretty busy port, and the Panama Canal is being widened now. It's going to open in 2014, and a lot of states are looking to take advantage of greater shipping cargo coming to the East Coast from that. And right now, the New Haven port is not really well positioned for that. The Bridgeport port hasn't been dredged since 1964. And as a result, a number of major importers have left Bridgeport for other states because the port's just not functioning well enough to handle their cargo.
And you too, you, Ben, have, like a lot of people have, been taking pokes at this practice of all these business tax credits, trying to get companies and different kinds of operations to move here or to stay here in some cases. You mentioned the Jackson Labs deal in your piece. What's wrong with that? I mean, they're talking about maybe the Central Connecticut corridor being turned into like equivalent to what the Silicon Valley did for California.
Yep. Well, I think there's a few problems with it. First of all, I think you need to look at these payment programs to companies like investments, and you have to say, okay, how much are we spending for the jobs that we're guaranteed to create? And the Jackson Labs deal, we're spending $300 million to bring a commitment of only 300 new jobs. So we're paying literally $1 million for each new job that's actually guaranteed to be as part of the deal. Now, as you say, its proponents have put forward this sort of, utopian vision that once Jackson Labs comes, all of a sudden tons of other biotech firms will follow. And I do think that encouraging, biotech and healthcare research in the state is a good idea. But, the presence of one additional company on the margin is not going to be what is the difference between having nothing or having a a massive, Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley didn't get started because California paid a ton of money for one company to move there, and then all of a sudden everything grew from that. It developed organically because of the workforce that was there and because of the overall business environment that was present in the area. So, I think it's a little inaccurate and overly optimistic to think that bringing Jackson Labs, this one company, is going to be what accounts for the entire biotech sector in the state.
So you don't think the Jackson Labs project is going to produce this organic growth, within the state, and businesses cropping up here? Bringing businesses from outside is not going to happen. Other similar kinds of companies.
I certainly hope that similar companies do come, but the notion that they'll come just because Jackson Labs is here, I think, is a little naive. There are already certain other, biotech and healthcare firms in Connecticut, and, the more of those you have, obviously you can help generate a hub. But, this is something the state has been trying to do for a decade, is promote, biotech in the state. Lots of other states are trying to do it too. We've had some limited success, but I don't think Jackson Labs is this one silver bullet. I think if you're going to say, okay, we have these $300 million, how are we going to spend that to attract businesses in the state? I think you could do it in a much more thoughtful way. Maybe we don't raise taxes on middle class taxpayers that makes it harder for companies that do move to the state to hire jobs, or maybe we invest more in the budgets of our community colleges and vocational schools, which are, being slashed right now, that could help train the workforce and keep Connecticut's traditional strength as a state with a highly educated workforce, which is something that's obviously important for complex companies in the healthcare and biotech space. I just don't think it's I think the goal is admirable, but I think the means that they're using to pursue it is cost ineffective and unlikely to be successful.
Ben Zimmer, the Connecticut Policy Institute Executive Director, joining us here on Terzi Talk, as in large part as a result of an op-ed piece that ran in the Journal-Inquirer newspaper on December 12th, so about a week and a half ago. One of your bugaboos with regard to deficit mitigation, Ben, is the governor's relationship with the state employees union. Expand on that.
Yep. Well, so there's sort of the immediate deficit problem, which has come from our job growth and our tax shortfall. But if you look kind of towards the longer future, and why I say the deficit's going to keep popping up like a bad game of whack-a-mole, is that we have these unfunded pension liabilities. So the state
Let's be clear. Yeah. There is no such thing as a bad game of whack-a-mole.
Fair enough.
Continue.
As everyone goes off to the holiday carnivals and is playing whack-a-mole, they'll now have a new thing they're thinking about.
Go ahead. Continue your thought on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the pensions that, we've promised a total of, over the next few decades, $60 billion of benefits to retired state workers that we currently don't have the money to pay for. And as those benefits come due in the next few years, we're going to need to, increase our spending by billions. It's going to cost billions of dollars more each year to pay those off. So if we're thinking in the next legislative session about what we can really do to create fiscal stability in the long term in the state, thinking about ways to reduce those benefits, I think, is really important. It's critical.
Yeah, good luck with that, right?
Yeah, well, exactly, because in the last, big bargain, which I'm sure everyone remembers from the last budget session, the governor promised not to reopen negotiations with the state employees union until the end of his term. So, the governor, at least, is very limited in in the actions he can take in regards to those benefits.
Well,
the legislature, however, could implement ways to reduce them if they wanted to.
In this latest deficit reduction move to wipe out the $400 million, there's a lot of concern about cuts to hospitals and other areas, and I can imagine what the cuts are going to be like to deal with this $1 billion plus projected deficit for the next fiscal year, which starts in July. I want to ask you about that, but we're going to be having to take a break here very shortly, Ben. We have to go to the Wall Street Journal report. Won't take long. It won't hurt. And I hope you'll hang on, and we'll finish up with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Ben Zimmer from the Connecticut Policy Institute. He'll continue to talk with us right after we take this break. All right, all this holiday music here, and we want you to be in the mood, but I know we've been bringing you down with talking all this financial stuff here, the state's tax situation, the revenue situation, the way we're spending money, and the way we're borrowing money. It's astronomical. I mean, Connecticut spends over $2 billion a year just servicing its debt. And, you can imagine how much great temptation there's going to be to borrow more to deal with this deficit that's going to hit us in July.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what we've been doing a lot of in the past, and it's something that Governor Rell did as well. So it's not not just a partisan thing, but it's just been a problem in Connecticut that we've seen for a long time is borrowing money for the future to spend today, and we're not spending it in ways that generate new jobs and new economic activity so that we can pay that debt off.
But realistically, aren't we going to have to borrow some with the size of the projected deficit for next fiscal year? We're going to have to, because we already had some pretty steep cuts just to deal with this deficit, and the next one is 3 times as big.
Yep. Well, I think what you need to do, first of all, is see. Is look into meaningful spending reductions. So right now what we've seen is, unfortunately, in the deficit mitigation plan, just cuts to social services principally. But I do think, if you look carefully, you could probably find a lot of savings opportunities in the budget that are less damaging to the state's residents. If you look, obviously one of the huge drivers of our spending is health care, and I think a lot of health care experts in the state believe Connecticut's spending per capita is one of the highest in the country, and that you could probably have some cost savings there, not in terms of reducing benefits, but in terms of reducing the way that services are delivered, restructuring delivery options, potentially reducing certain mandates that could help generate a lot of savings in that department. I think if you take a serious look at the way government is run, you could find a lot of efficiencies in terms of again streamlining the way the state spends its money. I think Chris Powell has noted that just by changing the holiday pay practices, you could save the state $100 million per year. But again,
what's that all about, Ben? Tell me about the holiday pay practices. What explain that?
Well, I think his point has been that the states, there's all these federal holidays where the state is, paying their workers for days off, and that there's way more state holidays. If you think of, in the private sector, you get a few holidays off per year, but you're not generally getting off, every holiday. You're not getting a paid day off work.
But that's a negotiated thing for many of the workers. I know some are not represented by a union, but that's a negotiated thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So again, that's something that they would not be able to get done. But I guess my point is just I do think that with again, it comes back to my original point about how it's politics and not policy that's driving what's being done in Hartford, is that the constraints here are not economic constraints. They're not an absence of ideas, but it's political constraints due to the system we've sort of imposed on ourselves up there.
Yeah. So we've been talking for about 20 minutes with Ben Zimmer, the executive director of the Connecticut Policy Institute. For those listeners who are not aware of what the Connecticut Policy Institute is, sir, you have the forum. Sell your wares.
We're a nonpartisan research institute on state policy, and we're focused principally on economic policy, as we're discussing here, and also education reform. And if you want to learn more about us, I recommend checking out our website, which is ctpolicyinstitute.org.
And is your email address on there in case people want to share their views with you? Or
yeah, my email address is on there, and I can say it here as well. Okay. It's ben.zimmer, Z-I-M-M-E-R, at ctpolicyinstitute.org. And if you Google Connecticut Policy Institute, should be the first thing to come up as well.
Can we expect you to be featured at some of the hearings up there at the Capitol when they start debating or talking about ways to deal with the next deficit? Will you be up at the Capitol?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a 501c3, so we don't engage in, an active lobbying, more about, issue awareness. Mm-hmm. But, I'll certainly be up there trying to urge people towards better policy.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining us, and go play whack-a-mole.
I will. Happy holidays.
Thank you. You too, Ben. Thanks a lot.
That's nice.